Welcome. This explainer comes from Michael Raviv's academic lecture series. We're taking university-level economics and finance and making it accessible to everyone. Think of this as an investment in your own understanding. Let's get started.
So let's jump right in with a massive question. How in the world do you measure something as huge and complicated as an entire country's economy? How do you put one single number on all of that activity? It sounds almost impossible, right? But there's actually a pretty logical system for it.
And it all starts with this one core idea called product. It's really simple at its heart. It's just the total cash value of everything an economy makes. Every car, every cup of coffee, every piece of software over a set amount of time, usually a year.
Now, in theory, the math is super simple. You just take the number of things you made, the quantity, and multiply it by the price of each thing. You do that for everything, add it all up, and boom, you get your total economic product. So here, with just 3 different items, we get $3,000. Easy enough. Now just imagine doing that for the millions and millions of products in a real-world economy. Okay, but getting that big total number is really just the first step. To truly understand it, we need to ask, where was this value created, and who created it? This brings us to a really key distinction, and it all boils down to one thing: location versus ownership. So on one side, you've got gross domestic product, what we all know as GDP. That counts everything made inside a country's borders. Doesn't matter who owns the factory, if it's in that country, it counts. Then on the other side, you have gross national product, or GNP. This tracks everything made by a country's citizens or companies, no matter where in the world they're located. Let's make this real. An American company, like Intel, has a factory in Israel. All the value of the computer chips they make there gets added to Israel's GDP because the production is happening domestically, within Israel's borders. But let's say an Israeli citizen owns a tire factory over in Canada. The value of all those tires, that contributes to Israel's GNP because the owner is Israeli. See the difference? Right, so this leads us to a really important question for anyone trying to figure out what's going on in an economy. Which number should you pay more attention to? The one about what's happening inside the country's borders, or the one about what its citizens are doing all over the globe? And the answer for most economists is pretty clear. It's GDP. And why is that? Well, because GDP is what's happening on the ground. It reflects the local jobs being created, the local wages being paid, and the local taxes being collected. It's a direct measure of the health of the economy right there. All right, so that's domestic versus national. Now let's add one more layer to this, because so far we've only been talking about gross product. To get the real story, we have to account for the simple fact that the tools we use to make things, well, they wear out. And this wear and tear has a name. It's called depreciation. The best way to think about it is with a car. The more you drive it, the more the tires get worn, the brakes get thin, the whole thing just becomes less valuable over time. The exact same thing happens to factory machines, to highways, to office buildings. Just by using them, they lose value. And this is where that difference between gross and net comes in. The gross product is that big, flashy number we started with, the total value of everything. But the net product, that's a much more honest number. It's what's left after you subtract the value lost to all that wear and tear. It shows you the true increase in a country's wealth. And the formula here is thankfully about as simple as it gets. You just take your gross domestic product, your GDP, you subtract the total value of depreciation, and what you're left with is called the net domestic product, or NDP. That's it. So we've got GDP, GNP, gross, net. You might be thinking, okay, why do all these definitions matter? Well, this is where it gets really cool, because these aren't just boring academic terms. They actually help us explain some really big, real-world economic puzzles. And that brings us to this fascinating question. Why is it that you often see smaller, developing countries post these insane growth rates, while huge, established economies like the US or Japan grow much more slowly? The concept of depreciation actually gives us the answer. Think about it like this. A developing nation has very little infrastructure to begin with, which means it has very low costs from things wearing out, very low depreciation. So almost every dollar they invest goes into building something brand new, which fuels incredible growth. But a developed nation? It has a massive amount of existing infrastructure, roads, bridges, power grids. They have to spend a huge chunk of money every single year just to maintain and replace what they already have. A lot of their investment isn't for new growth, it's just to keep from going backwards. So let's just quickly tie this all together. GDP is your go-to number for what's happening with local jobs and business. Depreciation, that's the hidden cost of keeping everything running. And that means the net product is the number that shows you what the real actual growth is after you've paid all the maintenance bills.
So if you take away one single thing from this, let it be this. If you really want to understand if an economy is moving forward, you have to look past that big gross number everyone talks about. The real story, the story of actual progress, is in the net.
We hope this explainer from Michael Raviv's series has helped make the economic world a little bit clearer. Honestly, the best investment you can ever make is in your own knowledge.
So now we know what all these terms mean, we know what product is, but that just opens up the next big question, doesn't it? How on earth do governments actually go out and measure all this stuff in the real world? We're going to dig into that next time. You hear about it in the news constantly. The national budget, the deficit, the surplus. But what does all that stuff actually mean? Well, today, we're going to break it all down nice and simple. Let's kick things off with the term you probably hear the most, budget deficit. It sounds pretty serious and kind of complicated, right? But I promise, by the end of this, you'll get exactly what it is, and it's not as intimidating as it sounds. So here's our roadmap. We're going to imagine a nation's budget as having just two big pockets, one for all the money coming in and one for all the money going out. We'll look at what goes in each, see what happens when we compare them, and then tie it all together with this really interesting idea of government savings. All right, let's dive into part one. We're starting with the most basic idea of all. You know, when you get right down to it, a country's budget isn't all that different from your own personal budget. It really just boils down to this: what a government takes in versus what it spends. Money in, money out. The whole big debate about deficits and surpluses, it all comes from the balance between these two sides. So let's start with the money inside. Now, you're probably thinking the government's income is just taxes, right? And yeah, you're not wrong, but there's this one crucial detail that most people miss, and it changes the entire picture. First up, you've got what economists call gross taxes. We'll just label it T. This is the total, massive pot of money the government collects from everyone and everything. Income tax, sales tax, you name it. It's the whole shebang before anything else happens to it. But here's the twist. The government doesn't actually get to keep all that cash. A huge chunk of it goes right back out the door, back to the people, but not as a payment for a job or a product. These are called transfer payments. Think about things like Social Security checks, unemployment benefits, or maybe child allowances. The government is literally just transferring money from that big pot of taxes directly into the hands of its citizens. So, and this is the key. To figure out how much money the government actually has to spend on running the country, you have to take the total gross taxes and subtract all those transfer payments. What you're left with is called net taxes. This is the real size of the in-pocket. Okay, so we've got our in-pocket figured out. It's net taxes. Now, let's look at the other side, the out pocket. Economists call this government spending, and they give it the simple label G. But G isn't just any money the government spends. It's very specific. It's really just two main things. First, it's the salaries for all government employees, from soldiers to school administrators. And second, it's all the stuff the government buys from private companies, like computers for offices, tanks for the military, or even just paper clips. That's G. And now, for the main event. This is where it all comes together. We've got our in-pocket, net taxes, T, and we've got our out-pocket, government spending, G. It's time to put them side by side and see what we get. So if the government spending, G, is bigger than its income from net taxes, T, boom, you have a budget deficit. Simple as that. The government spent more money than it actually had come in. Now, what if G is exactly equal to T? Well, that's what we call a balanced budget. The money going out perfectly matches the money coming in. And finally, the third option, if government spending, G, is less than the net taxes, T, the government has a budget surplus. It brought in more money than it spent. There's actually cash left over. Okay, so now we get to a really cool idea that kind of changes how you think about all this. These three states we just talked about, deficit, balanced, and surplus, they have another name. It's called government savings. This is the absolute key concept right here. A budget deficit isn't just some abstract accounting term. It's a direct reflection of the government's saving habits. It shows you the economic reality of what's happening. I know what you're thinking. Negative savings? How on earth is that possible? I mean, the words don't even seem to go together. Saving is putting money away, so how can it be negative? Well, negative savings is really just a fancy economist's way of saying you're spending more money than you make. And think about it. If you spend more than you earn, how do you make up the difference? You have to borrow it, right? You take out a loan. That's exactly what a government does when it runs a deficit. And that act of borrowing to cover overspending, that is negative savings.
This table ties it all together perfectly. A deficit means negative savings because the government is going into debt. A balanced budget means zero savings. No new debt, sure, but nothing's being put away either. And a surplus? That means positive savings. The government actually has extra money after all the bills are paid.
So a deficit is what happens in 1 year, when you spend more than you make and you have to cover it with loans. But that leaves us with a really big question to chew on. What happens when those annual deficits and the loans needed to pay for them just keep piling up year after year after year?